I'm Carl Gipson. I head up our small business technology and telecommunications research side of things. And you know, a lot of times you hear a lot of doom and gloom whenever the legislature is in session. And really, I've come to realize that this session, and I don't know, maybe Jason will disagree with me on this, but because of the huge budget deficit we're facing, it's protecting a lot of the business community from a lot of bad ideas. You saw a couple of years ago when the state was facing a surplus, or we had a surplus, all the pet projects the legislators wanted to have land on top of small businesses in particular move forward. But because they don't have any money for the pet projects, they have to get back to the core functions of government. So it protects the business community by and large. So it certainly has been a lot of fun this session, seeing a lot of these bad ideas die. It's not something that we're used to all the time. So I want to talk about a couple of things quick tonight. Jason mentioned economic stimulus. Stimulus being one of the buzzwords this winter. And what does economic stimulus constitute? What does it mean to stimulate the economy? Obviously, you know, with our national economy just absolutely in the toilet, our state economy right behind it. What can we do to move our state economy forward? Particularly as legislators take this up in Olympia, they only have so much power. They don't have the same monetary policy power that the feds have. So what can they do in state government to get people back in work, expand the state economy? Well, one thing that when the session kicked off early January that they talked about doing was increasing unemployment insurance benefits for folks who were out of work. And how they wanted to do this was to draw down part of the $4 billion budget or unemployment insurance trust fund that we had built up, $4 billion surplus. And what they did is they increased the benefits by at least $45 a week and increased the minimums that were sent out to these folks who were laid off. Now, it was a bit of a gamble. I don't necessarily disagree with what this policy, because they're drawing down a surplus. You know, the employers paid the surplus, however, so I think they need to get up and acknowledge that first. But you're drawing down something that you have an excess of. One reason why it was a gamble, however, is that they calculated the benefits on a 7.5% unemployment rate in Washington State. Well, just last week it was the Employment Security Department released the figures that we are now at 8.4. So this gamble I'm a little worried about now, because that means that the drawdown rate is quicker, or is going faster than they had anticipated. The second thing with that issue is that they kicked this off saying that this was economic stimulus. Now, I would disagree with that. Economic stimulus means growing the private sector, growing productivity, making businesses more efficient. Simply taking money from folks who have paid unemployment insurance premiums and handing it off to folks who are unemployed does not grow the economy. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. And you know, we blogged about it. We put out a legislative memo on this issue saying, look, this policy isn't the worst policy I've ever seen by any means, but don't call it economic stimulus. And now, if you look, no one's calling this economic stimulus. It's actually hit a tone with them. They say that it's part of the you know, to play off the Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It's financial recovery, financial security is what they'll call it, but they don't call it economic stimulus because they realize now it's not going to stimulate anything. It will help some folks, that's for sure, but it's not stimulus. Second, a couple of quick bills that are certainly of concern of the business community. I said that a lot of the pet projects were killed, but there are still issues out there of great concern to the business community. Number one is what's referred to as the Worker Privacy Act. What the employer community calls the Employer Gag Bill. And this is a bill that's very important because this is the one, you've probably heard some talk about this. This is the one where employers would not be allowed to talk to their employees about certain aspects, whether it's religious, political, charitable. And the unions are pushing this so that it makes it that much more difficult for an employer to step in if they know their employees are talking about collective bargaining agreements, and basically present the other side. So this would basically gag the employer from being able to let employees know the ups and downs, the benefits, and the bad stuff about unionism. So that bill was of great concern. It ran into a little bit of an ethical problem last week, and is now dead. But I would very much say that bill will be back in some way, shape, or form next session. The next bill of concern has to do with the State Labor Relations Act. Essentially, this bill would make it a lot easier for small businesses to be unionized. And again, this is of great concern, particularly to the small business community who doesn't necessarily have the HR staff or the folks or to deal with the ins and outs of collective bargaining. It puts them on the run. It makes labor have a lot more power over the small business community, and that is of great concern to small businesses. That one died as well, but again, this isn't the first year this issue has reared its ugly head. Look for it again next session. I'm always trying to end on a positive note. So just today, as a matter of fact, in the House, the State Government Affairs Committee passed out a bill 5042, which provides a waiver for small businesses for the first time that they violate some paperwork with dealing with the state agencies. I realize it's a small step, but one thing that we've seen this year and that I worked really hard on and I will continue to work on is regulatory reform. How about a deregulatory stimulus package is what I talk to legislators. And you see this year there's a lot of bills, and granted most of them died, but they actually got hearings. There was actually talk about bills about making it easier for small businesses in Washington State on the regulatory side of things. So 5042, which passed the Senate unanimously, I believe will probably fly through the House as well, will provide a first-time waiver for your paperwork violation for a small business. It's a baby step, but it is a step in the right direction. We'll continue to work on regulatory reform. Last thing I'll mention about regulatory reform is Dan and I have been working with the Attorney General's office on regulatory reform. Attorney General Rob McKenna has taken upon himself to kick off kind of a task force on regulatory reform. So look, over the next year or so, look for this as we work with the Attorney General's office. We're real encouraged about people talking about regulatory reform, and not just specific nitty-gritty regulations, but really getting at the core problem, which is lack of accountability, which is just the sheer proliferation of regulations that govern business. It's very important that we provide Washington State businesses an environment where they want to expand, businesses want to relocate from other states. So I'd be happy to answer questions after we're done. Mike.